We watch thousands of hours of YouTube content, whether it be podcasts or pointless bullshit. We read dozens, maybe even hundreds of books. Attend maybe even live masterclasses, all in the pursuit of trying to gain knowledge. But the biggest shift in my life didn't come from learning more. It came from finally realizing I don't know shit. I used to think that knowledge was power until I realized I was just trying to use it to control everything around me. People I was around, outcomes of situations that I was in, and even the way that I felt. But when I finally dropped that illusion, I took my first tiny step out of the matrix. Now, there is one idea from an unusual old man nicknamed Socrates. And if you keep your mind open, you might just escape the matrix as well. So I read one of the most eye-opening metaphors I think I have ever come across in a book called Sacred Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And it's definitely one of those things that you could just easily gloss over while reading this book and think, that's a funny little story. No, my friends, for me, this was a warning. A warning that I was ready to receive, and you might be too. Dan, the main character in the book, is being taught something by his mentor that he nicknamed Socrates. And Socrates is trying to drive home the point of how dangerous it is to think that we know anything. So Socrates works at this gas station, and while Dan is hanging out with him, he goes out with Socrates to fill up a car. And as he's fueling up the car, he says this to Dan: like most people, you have been taught to gather information outside of yourself. From books, from magazines, from experts. And like this car, you open up and allow the facts to pour in. And sometimes it's some premium stuff, but sometimes it's some low-octane bullshit. But you are always buying your knowledge at the current market rate. So right after he tells him this, he allows the gas to start overflowing out of the car's tank, spilling over the sides and onto the floor. And I don't know about you, this has happened to me once while I was filling up my car. It freaked me the fuck out. And I believe that this was a symbolism for Dan to actually catch his attention and see how freaky that is to allow that to happen to that car. So as he does that, he looks at Dan and says, like this gas tank, you are overflowing with preconceptions, full of useless knowledge. You may hold many facts and opinions, yet you know little of yourself. Damn. And then he delivers the punch to Dan. Before you can learn anything, you must first empty your tank. I'm not gonna lie, man. The first time I read that, I had to pause, really think about what he just said, and it made me start reflecting over all of these little moments in my life that felt insignificant. All the things that I just kind of glazed over that just felt normal. How many prejudices do I have? How much stuff do I know? How many things and facts are removable in my head that I've never allowed anybody or anything to change my way of thinking? Because like me, I think that most of us are just trying to run around proving how full our tank is. We flex these random ass facts. We argue opinions with our friends and family, co-workers perhaps. And we like to fill the silences with, well, actually, I read somewhere. You know what's interesting? With a bunch of shit we don't even actually know is true. But what if real wisdom starts with emptying all this random bullshit? What if? See, now I used to think I was waking up because I was reading all of these books recommended by these social media gurus, you know, the most productive books. I was listening to all the right podcasts, even partaking in the cold plunges and the dopamine detox, realizing that I was just doing all this stuff because I was told to do it, not ever asking why. So the book asked this question earlier in the chapter, but it only sunk in after I read that part of the story. How do you know you haven't been asleep your whole life? And how do you know you're not asleep right now? How do you know? And that is the scary ass thing about being asleep. It feels an awful lot like being awake. And I'm sure you guys can tell by now, I'm not talking physically, I'm talking mentally. And that is precisely how life just passes you by. Days, weeks, months just disappear like smoke. And it's because we are on autopilot. And we're full, not with wisdom, but with prejudices, ego, and a whole lot of noise. For instance, have you ever had an hour drive home and you're like, fuck, I gotta drive this whole hour home and sit in traffic? But then you blink and you realize, man, there's only 10 minutes left of this drive. How did I even get here? Sleepwalking. Or when you get to work and you know you got a shit ton of stuff to do and it's gonna be a long day at work, but before you know it, you look up at the clock and there's only an hour left. Sleepwalking. And how many of us say the same shit every year? Oh my God, it's already August 2025. Sleepwalking. And again, I want to emphasize this point. While we think it's a smart move to follow what we're seeing, like the example of the people who make videos, it's funny because I'm probably going to make one of these videos one day. While we think it's a smart move to just blindly follow what the successful people are doing, like reading the 7 books, the 9 books, the 200 books that make you ultra productive, take a second to ask yourself, why? Why are you doing it? Why am I reading this book? Is it just because somebody told me to? Growth is not about mindlessly stuffing our faces with more information. It's about emptying that tank so that way something more profound and something deeper can show up in our lives. Look, I'm not saying everybody who's gonna watch this is asleep. You might be woke as fuck, I don't know. But be careful. A lot of us think we're awake because we're busy. A lot of us think we're awake because we got routines and movements and notifications. But again, entire weeks, months, and years will pass by and you look back and wonder, where did the time go? You should know exactly where the time is going if you're awake. And so now I've come to realize we're not actually living, we're just reacting. We're on autopilot, on a script. But it's because we're filled with all these different types of prejudice. Do you know what prejudice means? Contempt prior to investigation. And to take it one step deeper, contempt means you think you're above something or someone. So one of the biggest examples I've found in my life of prejudice that I have are listening to all of these random myths that people spout off like idiots. And I'm one of the idiots that just goes around thinking that it's true because I think it's beneath me to go research it and figure it out for myself. For instance, the fact that we only use 10% of our brain scans have shown not only is almost every part of the brain lit up at some point in time, even when the brain is dormant, there are parts of it that are lit up. Another one that I've heard is, if you shave your hair, it grows back thicker. No, it doesn't. I shave this shit almost every day. Now the ends of the hair become more coarse, so it feels more prickly, but it does not actually affect the root of the hair. And one I've heard since I was a kid, and I almost even got punished for, was, don't crack your knuckles, it'll give you arthritis. There is no scientific evidence linking cracking knuckles to arthritis, because I'm sure, as we've all heard, it's actually just air pockets being released in between the joints. So how many things do we just hear and we go along with? Think of some of those silly childhood myths that you've heard and actually bother to take a look. That could be a small step in the right direction. By the way, I think one of the funniest myths I've ever heard my entire life, I mean, it came from a hillbilly bus driver, so I had to take it with a grain of salt, but this lady swore up and down, if you cut up onions and put it in your socks, it will relieve any illness that you have because the onions suck the sickness through your feet and into the onion. I didn't have to look that one up to know that was bullshit, but she was so convinced she almost had me believe in it. A simple way to sum up prejudice so you can start looking at your life is this. It's how we think things are supposed to be. Prejudices about ourselves, prejudice about other people. What's right? What's wrong? What's smart? What's safe? How much stuff in our life is just supposed to be like that? And how many things and experiences are you missing out on because of these prejudices? So if someone didn't recommend a book to you, are you just never gonna read it? What about your political views? Are they actually your views? Or are they just passed down from generation to generation? What do you actually think? And maybe even your lifestyle and your diet. How does your house look like? What do you put into your body? Is that stuff that you think is right? Or Or is that stuff that you were told was right? But that is the trap right there. We think we know. And when we think we know, we stop noticing things. And the second we stop noticing things, we stop growing as people. So right now, take a moment, look back on your life. We've mentioned a couple of different topics. Think about these points of views and these beliefs and these facts. Where the hell do they come from? And how many of these prejudices have just been casually tossed into your brain? Without consent, by the way. And how many of these are based on actual experience? Your experience. Because that's the only thing that's worth a damn. Your experience, not someone else's. So when you finally empty that gas tank and you have room to allow the experiences of life, you'll see a lot of these questions that you have unanswered will become clear. Who are you? And what do you want? Not what somebody else wants, not what somebody else thinks for you. I know a lot of us have lived that life. What our parents think is right for us, what our family, friends, teachers, whatever. But that's not the way you have to live. You can live your life and you can live your truth. But it starts with realizing that we know nothing. Because the moment you stop trying so hard to be right, whether that's to yourself or someone else, that is the moment you actually get a chance to wake the fuck up. If you've ever had any regrets in your life because of missed opportunities and wonder why that happens to you or keeps happening to you, watch this video here. It'll help you clear that right up.